We are here to welcome our moderator for the session, Mr. Ashim Sharma, Partner and Group Head, Nomura Research Institute India Private Limited, India. I would also request my panelists to be on stage. I invite them on stage, Mr. Rajesh Bysani, CPO Zoomcar, India, Mr. Michael Hirsh, Regional Director for India, Mobileye and Intel Company, Israel, Dr. Annie Kerr, Global Head Urbanization, MacDonald's, Hong Kong, Mr. Dattatreya Gaur, Vice President Robert Bosch, Engineering and Business Solutions Private Limited, India, Mr. Mahesh Shinde, GM Head, Indoor Testing, Tata Motors Limited, India. I now hand over the session to the moderator for the session. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think we have a very august panel here to discuss one of the most upcoming areas in automotive when we talk about it with connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles. I think some estimates say that cars today have the processing power of about 20 personal computers and processing something like 25 GB of data per hour. And when we connect all of this, say connecting a car to a car or connecting the car to the infrastructure, the kind of possibilities of solutions that come up are manifold. And I think several of the panelists have also displayed in their companies. Some of them have worked on the infrastructure side to showcase how the rest of the infrastructure can be made conducive for such solutions. And I think all of these solutions then finally also gravitate into fully autonomous vehicles. We've all heard of the fully autonomous cars from Google and also trials that are going on with Uber and Lyft for these. So I think we have a great opportunity today to hear from this esteemed group of panelists on this really interesting topic of connected and autonomous vehicles. Before I go sort of into specific questions, I would just pose one question to the panelists, and maybe we can start with Mr. Dattatreya Gaur from Bosch to answer this one. One of the prerequisites for autonomous vehicles, for instance, is predictable road traffic conditions. But any of us who's ever ventured on Indian roads knows that predictability is one thing that we can never, ever take for sure on an Indian road. So how do you think autonomous vehicles, if ever, can come on Indian roads?
Sure, very good question indeed. So good afternoon. Autonomous vehicles, let us first think about it. My submission is that we're talking of hyperlocal solutions, and whenever there is software to differentiate, it is very easy for us to get hyperlocal solutions. But for a moment, think of this. Western countries, any city that you take, the aspects of autonomous driving are far different from what it would be in India. So answer number one is that yes, we will have autonomous driving vehicles in India, but in our own Indian context. And it is not a race or it is not a comparison that we have to say A is better than B. Only thing is that how we can bring these technologies and still get a lot of value derived. So I would say that at first, our technologies that we will bring to India or that we will see come to India soon are on a low speed, high traffic density driving situations. Yeah? How do we get comfort to drivers on that part? Probably the highway driving, autonomous driving would be a distant feature that would come onto Indian roads, and that is my take on that. And there are lots of technologies which also assist in this high traffic density, low speed applications.
Sure, thank you. And I think you clearly put it, it's going to be low speed, high traffic density where we're going to see it. So with that, I would take the question to Dr. Kerr. Mott MacDonald has seen this evolution across cities around the globe. And many cities have developed, I would say, at least infrastructure in pockets that could suit autonomous vehicles. Case in point could also be an ADAS system, they said, which has to detect lane departure, has to have the lane marking standardized on the roads. I think we might not have that also in India right now. So if you could share with us some of your experiences of how some of these countries have been able to evolve along this, getting the infrastructure ready for autonomous vehicles.
An incredibly good question, because I actually think that for all the hype and all the discussion that there is about autonomous vehicles and the revolution in many places, nobody has actually really cracked the nut And I think that nobody has actually really got to the point about really understanding about lane marking and so forth, because the autonomous vehicles might be autonomous. They might not have a driver actually, at the controls, but we're still thinking about autonomous vehicles mixed in with regular vehicles, and how you actually maintain lane movements and so forth. You've got humans involved here. You've got humans involved in terms of how people are moving from place to place. I think the question about how you actually introduce autonomous vehicles is actually really important, because many people are talking about this as being on one day it's, as we know today, status quo. Tomorrow, autonomous vehicles will take over. And I don't think it's ever going to happen like that, unless you have a place like in the United Arab Emirates, where they actually do want to do that. They haven't decided on the date, but they have decided that they want to put autonomous ships, ferries, trains, drones, cars, airplanes, etc., into effect on a particular date. But that actually is hugely difficult. And what they're struggling with is not the issue about technology or the actual infrastructure, but they're struggling with prioritization and which autonomous vehicle gets priority over which. And they're struggling with the legalities and the regulations, because it's many different parts of the government that are involved in each of these individual forms of transport. So I think it's the policies, I think it's the humans, and I think it's the regulations that are the biggest challenge, not the actual infrastructure. Engineers can build anything, technologists can give technology, but when you get the urbanists and the technologists together, that's when you get the solution. But at the moment, mostly they are still some way apart.
That's very nicely put. When you get the technologists and the urbanists together, only then you're going to get a solution that's workable. And also good to know, I mean, heartening to know that we are not too far behind because the others are not too far ahead.
No, I actually believe that there might be a leapfrogging as well. So I'm very confident that there are opportunities to leapfrog and not to take the step that other countries are taking, but to actually go much farther into the future.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. I would move now this question to Mobileye. And Michael, you've developed quite a few systems also that go into these vehicles. We also understand when these systems get into the vehicle, the cost of the vehicle goes up. And I'll later on take that question also to Tata Motors. But we have an extremely cost-sensitive Indian consumer here. So how do you convince them that if you buy an autonomous vehicle, okay, for these 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers, you won't have to do anything, but the rest of the time you might still have to drive it and things like that. And also, do you think the costs are eventually coming down? Have you seen that kind of a movement also?
Okay, so I think actually all of your opening questions, including the last one, boil down to how relevant, if at all, is autonomous and our autonomous technologies to India. Just to put things in context, autonomous driving is already a practical reality. We at Mobileye, as an Intel company, have committed together with partners to make autonomous driving a commercial reality in 2021. But already we have autonomous vehicles in very challenging environments, whether it be in Jerusalem with all the lanes and so forth. And this is done with great success. But this is in order to answer your question of affordability and how relevant this is to India. I wish, please, to make it clear that the autonomous revolution that is taking place, we at Mobileye, where we already have 27 million vehicles out there with our cameras in them, and just last week as I was getting on the plane, I saw another 8 million vehicle win. And that's to say, so we certainly see, we have these cameras in millions of vehicles around the world, and we have what is called a single effort philosophy. So if that means that as we gain the capabilities and the sensing capabilities and the mapping capabilities, then we make these available already. The autonomous vehicle that may be coming to India, and to be perfectly honest, that is not the most pressing need at the moment. The most pressing need at the moment is 150,000 people who are losing their lives on the roads every year. That's to say, just in the 3 days of this conference, so we're talking about an enormous, about 1,500 people that would have lost their lives. So we are taking the sensing technologies that are the building blocks for autonomous technology, and these are already available in India. That is to say, are already reducing accidents to great extent. With regard to the hectic environment that is out there, so we are using our market position, the fact that we already have millions of cameras out there, they become our mappers, real-time, ultra-high refresh rate mappers, so that if you head down the road and I head 1 minute after you, you are already mapping the road for me at 10 kilobytes per kilometer. Why do I mention these technical sides of things? Because it is all entirely scalable. I can tell you that within India already, these technologies are saving lives. Mobileye, that's to say Mobileye collision avoidance is saving lives and well under 45,000 rupees per vehicle. And as we move into OEM, we're going to see this come right down. My mission is to Indianize, domesticize, make this technology as Indian as possible. And with Intel as our partners in Bangalore, that's already basically done.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for that response. And, you know, about this make in India of autonomous vehicle solutions, and you already embarked on this path. And also very interesting to know about this network of cameras that you set up, and which is actually hopefully going to make our roads much, much safer than what they are today. I'll move the question now to Mahesh. You know, we believe Tata Motors is probably the best testing facilities in the country. You know, I've personally also seen some of those. You could test, you could crash test a car. You have those huge climatic chambers and all of those things. But when it comes to autonomous vehicles, there's a whole plethora of situations that you need to test that vehicle in. Are you already taking steps towards that? And do you think, you know, there are some big inherent challenges in being able to do it in a controlled environment, and some of the situations are really going to come when you actually put the thing on the road?
Yeah. In fact, I thank you for that question, because what happens is that we look for the technology, and what actually is on the ground is something different. So as a OEM, as Tata Motors, if I can say that what we are doing is that we go progressively, meaning we go to connected cars and ADAS. Obviously, ministry has said that we will be going in with electric vehicles. So we have to couple electric vehicles with the connected cars and ADAS features. Now, as far as ADAS features are concerned, yes, we are developing certain features into the vehicle. Some of the models already have, like Hexa and Nexon, where we will have a cruise control and parking system and all those things. So if you really ask me, we are already into development, or maybe some of the features already adopted and tested, validated and all. Now, coming to autonomous vehicle, there are a couple of challenges, not as OEM, but as the whole automotive industry. Like, we are not having much of the infrastructure. And the infrastructure is also calling for the space. We have a high traffic density, and we need the space for having an infrastructure and control command center or something like that. So, considering government's response, I think the autonomous vehicle in India will take another 10 to 15 years. But connected cars is a must. Not only it increases or enhances the safety of the person or the pedestrian, but for the driver, it is out of the blue experience inside the car and outside the car. Okay. Second point will be, as regard to commercial vehicles, you can have platooning, you can have connected trucks so that you can save on some energy and all those things. So in that sense, we are experimenting. We are not yet in commercial vehicle as far as the connectivity is concerned. But definitely the connectivity will be there in terms of infrastructure to know the weather and the traffic congestions and all those things. But one more thing which we should look for is the data that is coming in. It's security and safety. Because either you're going to, give it to the central command or to the cloud. people may misuse it. But at the same time, you can have that data mining for the monetization of it. So from that angle also we are looking for. Currently, to give you a short answer, based on the priorities, we are focusing on ADAS and the connectivity part of it. Autonomous and monetizing of data will come at a later stage.
Right. Thank you for putting that roadmap that you have in place before all of us. And connected vehicles is the thing that I will go on next after this. And since you also touched upon the data part, so I have a question here for Rajesh. I believe you all have brought out a solution. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Cadabra, right? In some markets, which is an autonomous driving solution, and you've been able to capture a lot of data out of that, I believe. Have you seen any reduction in accidents or improvement in driving behavior, or suggestions for doing the same by doing some data mining on that data?
Sure. Yeah. So actually, so Cadabra is not an autonomous driving solution, but it is more of a car intelligence kind of solution, right? So as we expand into marketplace kind of model where the cars are actually not owned by us, right? It is a car sharing kind of model where the car is also, if let's say you own a car and you're not using it frequently, you can list it on the platform, which customers can come and pick it up. So in my case, I'm on my platform, the customer booking and also the customer listing are both customers. And the car is being driven, essentially when you book a Zoomcar, you're driving somebody else's car. So having a very, very high visibility into how the car is being driven is very critical for us. Because obviously as a business, I will have some leeway and some leeway to some damages or some maintenance costs that I can take in. But if it is somebody else's car, then I don't have that leeway, right? So which is why this Cadabra system essentially takes a 360 degree view into how the customer is driving. And yes, we have also experimented with Mobileye and a couple of other ADAS solutions as well. But what we have realized is that there's a lot of grooming that you need to do for the customers, because some of the bad habits are very, very they're inherited, and it's very difficult to change that behavior in one single drive. But what we found to be most effective is building signals that give you advanced kind of notice, right? For example, hard braking, hard acceleration, hard cornering, frequent pedal movements, frequent accelerator movements. So all of those kind of things, even if the customer is not in a high risk kind of situation, but that gives me an advanced signal in terms of how risk averse is this customer, or how risky is this driving to my car and to the surrounding. And also, I mean, from a connected car perspective, or from intelligent car perspective, there are a lot of, even today, a lot of cars are still, and when you look at parts like clutch, brake, and tires, they're all still mechanical. And we don't really have a lot of data that can be derived from the car. So we've built models on top of whatever basic data that we get to sort of identify what was how much did the clutch deteriorate in this, because I mean, one of the use cases that we see during summers is people go to Ladakh, and a lot of people are not comfortable with driving on hard sections and stuff like that, right? So we need to build advanced sort of diagnostic solutions that lets us know, okay, this customer is putting a lot more stress on the clutch than usual. So we can communicate with them and stuff like that.
Thank you for that. And I think in a country like ours where we still feel that driving certification is probably not the best, maybe later on this data capturing of yours can also be used for retraining people or become a part of training courses in several of these training centers. Extending that logic, I'd move to Dr. N. So this data, like Zoomcar's capturing, is for the driving habits. Many of the things like you mentioned about sudden acceleration, braking, etc., is also a function of how the road has been designed, or how the intersections are designed, what sort of blind spots are coming. Do you, in your experiences globally, also see that some of this data is being used to redesign or improve the existing road networks, whether it is intra-city or whether it's intercity?
Another very good question, because actually I think that is one of the things that is missing in many of the authorities' minds. And I think we hear a lot about the future of mobility, the future of this, that and the other, autonomous vehicles, etc. But design standards are design standards. And to get design standards changed and to get the the changes in terms of the bridges and access, roads and so forth, changed is incredibly difficult regardless of which country you're actually working in. And we had a workshop in London recently about the future of mobility with our young colleagues, and they were all saying, why is it so difficult? Why is it so difficult to actually change the design standards for a bridge? We're designing this bridge that's using codes from some time ago. We're not actually thinking about going forward. And I think that is another of the challenges, actually. Some agility is required and some forward thinking. And this maybe comes back again to this technology and urbanist debate coming together and getting the authorities actually really understanding that the policies, the regulations and the legislation has to actually move apace and not trail behind. And I think it comes, if I may extend that point, it comes a little bit to the gentleman at the end who said something about data and security of data. I think that's another very, very, very important point where I think authorities and regulators are lagging behind in terms of the putting some regulations around privacy and the use of data. And yesterday I spoke at a session and I was asking, how many cities do we know or countries do we know where there's a chief privacy officer who's looking after the data and the security of data and personal data, coming on a day of today, which is the day that the General Data Requirement Protection Law comes into effect, a European Union law. I think it's really, really important to ask this question because data privacy comes into your cars, you're sharing cars, your mobility, everything about your apps, everything about the way that we live today actually is shared with lots of people. Now they may have good intents, they may use it properly, they may use it very well for the benefit of humanity, but maybe not. And it's that one maybe not day that when somebody presses the button and tells all autonomous vehicles in downtown Stockholm to turn left, that will be the day that will be dreadful carnage.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point that you brought out. And the more the data, the more the issues around privacy. So in our quest for getting everything connected, we need to be mindful about this very important aspect as well. I think just staying on the data thing, first let me take an OEM perspective and then also an OES perspective on that. So I believe Tata Motors also has a huge repository of data. You would be having drive cycles for cities, you would be having drive cycles for highways, for different kinds of vehicles, commercial vehicles, within that buses, trucks, cars, all of that. Do you see a possibility of the government working with you all? Because now this is also not somebody's personal data. You've collected it while you were testing the vehicles for so many hundreds of kilometers, and you capture a lot of road data also out there. Do you see there is a possibility of, say, the NHAI or the city road building organizations coming together along with you and capturing some of this data to better design roads for us?
Yeah, as far as the data which is being generated by us for current, road load data that we collect for validation purpose, itself is a huge data. We have our own cloud and then data is stored there. But when we talk about full-fledged connectivity to the cars, or later on at the later part of the period, if we go for autonomous vehicle, one vehicle will generate about 4,000 GB data per day. Now multiply it by number of vehicles at that, and obviously we need a super infrastructure or cloud, and unless government helps it, no single company, forget about only Tata Motors, but no single company will be able to handle that much data. Plus, government will have more control and they will be able to protect the data much more better. So in my opinion, yes, we will have to go with the government infrastructure. And that's what I was saying, that unless we have an infrastructure, remember one thing, that if I say honestly, the typical Indian mindset in terms of traffic or traffic sense, in terms of getting in line with the regulation and policy, has to be driven rather than coming on its own evolution within the minds of the drivers or the people or the pedestrian. So So the answer is yes, we will have to work with government on that.
All right, thank you, thank you. And now, moving the same question to Bosch, you probably in India making most of the things in the vehicle that are capturing this data. So you also get a lot of this data. From your perspective, do you also see, collaborating with the government, and you may be getting some very specific data also, say from your ABS sensors, from how the acceleration is happening, so hence the fuel delivery and all of those things. Do you also see a potential of working with the governments to better design roads with this data?
Absolutely. So I would basically not get into the data protection part of it, because I think when data is there, we'll find ways and means to protect the data. And of course, thieves will be one step ahead. Yeah. So this police and thief game will continue forever. Yeah. I'm not getting in there, but I'm an optimist. So I will tell you from the technology point of view what this means. This means that there is one car, there is one set of data coming out, but it has huge, huge, huge potential for multiple stakeholders. And you just saw what is possible. Yeah. We make automotive parts. So for me, it will be a very, very big interest to see how our ABS systems are working, how our brake systems are working, how do I calibrate my systems much easier. And if I start on that, it goes a little bit technical, but I can tell you that when we try to bring a new vehicle into the market, and that Mahesh would also agree, how much time we spend on calibration of these cars. Yeah? And if we have, through connectedness, a possibility to do a real-time, in the field, over-the-air update on calibration, how nice it would be. Yeah, so we see a lot of value which will get unlocked. Now, we talk about, Rajesh just said that, when a driver is basically braking the car or using accelerator, frequent acceleration, this data is of interest to, let's say, his company. This data is also interesting to me, because I would be able to predict from the physics of the brake pads as to how long it takes for the brake pads. And this would be very good for OEMs, because then they can actually guide the user somehow to the genuine parts workshop, so that they can timely get. Yeah? And through getting an advanced information on millions of cars, we will be able to completely transform the supply chain management of how we handle the spare parts. So what we are going to see is a volcano of opportunities. Let me just put it, the same data on driver behavior is also interesting for insurance companies. Yeah? Today I pay X amount, and if I'm a good driver, they might like to give me a discount just to attract me. Yeah? So now you imagine the possibilities. And with these possibilities, it is really very important to basically see that new business models will evolve. Nobody has seen it coming. It will all come like onion peels, yeah, one after the other, like other. If you ask somebody to come and give you a PowerPoint slide and say, please develop a map, I think it's impossible, because the opportunities are unlimited. And that's the excitement. Yeah?
I think really that volcano of data that you're talking about could actually transform mobility and the way we drive, the whole ownership experience also. Taking the same question to Michael. Michael, have you seen something of that sort happen in some markets? Because you're present in several markets globally. And then after that, I also request Rajesh to respond if, within Zoomcar, you're doing something like that with that data.
Okay, so the question now is around data, and just if I am sitting here with the Mobileye hat and as part of the Intel group, I wish to make it perfectly clear that if we've heard talk of terabytes or gigabytes of data that needs to be somehow transmitted from thousands of millions of vehicles, this is no longer the case. That is to say that the mapping that we are already carrying out using all of those millions of vehicles that are out there with collision avoidance, I repeat, takes place at 10 kilobytes per kilometer. All of the data, all of the metadata that is needed in order to map an ecosystem for autonomous driving, or in order to identify infrastructure deficiencies or whatever the case may be, that is the current state of the technology. 10 kilobytes per kilometer, this is what we're already doing. Now, if we are talking about connectivity, I wish here, Mobileye is an Israeli company, and if we have a solution, we get out there, and that's why I mentioned what we call the single effort philosophy. So we are making autonomous driving a reality, but we already have technologies that we're applying within India, and I will give you one fascinating example with regard to with regard to data. We, as you may be aware, provide the collision avoidance systems. I think I mentioned Zoomcar also has been employing these systems that tell a driver if there's a pedestrian in front, if they afford collision, lane departure, and so on. That, by the way, in fleets that have been deployed here in India, in the crazy conditions of Bangalore and Delhi traffic conditions, very effectively reduce the incidence of accidents by a documented 74%, and I can tell you that we're above 80%. But what we're able to do with that data is fascinating, because any accident that has been avoided, and again, I'm speaking to you, we can look at this connectivity and the autonomous driving as a long-term project, something like a Delhi metro line that at some future date will be open. Or we can look at it as a space mission that even before we land on Mars or land on the moon, we can already enjoy all of the technologies that we develop along the way. And we are already applying the technologies along the way. In Bangalore, we have school buses, 25 school buses, that we have already equipped with collision avoidance systems. Now, every time that we prevent an accident, God forbid a child crosses the road, and we have provided the warning to the driver. So the accident has been avoided, or the collision has been avoided, but there is enormous value in an accident that did not take place. India until now has been mapping black spots. We at Intel, at Mobileye and Intel, are already building a grey spot map of India, which is, and this is already underway. That is to say that this is not a concept that we have. We have already started with the Karnataka government, and we will be extending this, whereby we are mapping infrastructure deficiencies, danger areas where, my God, in the past 15 days, there have been 20 near misses on this particular intersection. Head out, see what is happening there, solve the problem now. Don't look at some budgetary allocation in 2 years' time when the minister will come and cut the ribbon. We're able to do it now. So that is a little idea of where I say, and I mention it again, I mean, Nitin Gadkari has said, what is happening at the moment is something that cannot be tolerated. By the way, I don't know if you as Indians are aware, but if nothing is done, or if not enough is done with regard to road accidents, 3.21 million Indians will lose their lives by the year 2030. Okay, that's something, and if we take injuries and all of the families that have been taken out of the productive economy, that's something akin, I think, to an atomic bomb going off over a tier 2 city. Okay, that is what is going to happen here in India, and that is why we have taken the bull by the horns. We regard this to be a mission of the greatest urgency, and we are already underway. Okay, so this is already happening.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm not sure how many of us knew about that, and that you're actually implementing these things in our cities. So that's really, really wonderful. So over to you, Rajesh.
Yeah, so from a data point of view, I think a couple of examples that other panelists have mentioned. So some of those we are already implementing. For example, sourcing of parts. I mean, so sourcing of parts for servicing is obviously a huge issue for us from a business point of view, right? I mean, because that means two things. That means it might be compromising the safety of the person who is driving the car, and it will also mean that will be a downtime for the car, right? So we're trying to build in predictive maintenance systems that will, when I know that there is something wrong with the part, I can give place an order in advance. So they can source before I need a requirement, kind of thing, right? So that is how we're working with the local service providers to ensure that we are not compromising the safety of the customer. The second thing is, like I mentioned, we are a marketplace, and most of our cars are owned by other customers. We are now working with a new insurance startup, which is to provide dynamic insurance premiums based on the driving behavior of the person, right? Now, and this is something, I mean, this is an innovation. So we are trying to come out with a monthly kind of package instead of an annual premium with the insurance provider. So that's also something that is that is probably going to go live in the near future. It's not yet live, kind of thing. And apart from that, so and another very interesting use case, or one of the things that we are trying to solve is, like I mentioned, that heartbreaking and is a huge problem, because the impact and the effect that it has on the car is pretty significant, and it also signifies maybe actual event happening on the road, right? But one of the primary reasons for heartbreaking is unmarked speed breakers. Unmarked speed breakers and potholes which are not visible, right? But we have the, so our vehicles are equipped with a 3G accelerometer and 3-axis accelerometer and G sensors and stuff like that. So we are equipped to actually figure out, as in whether it was a speed breaker, whether it was a pothole, what was the size of the pothole, and what was the visibility at that time, and those kind of things, right? And we're trying to map this out across highways because we know most of the speed breakers are not mapped correctly, and potholes are a serious problem. So these are a very serious risk to every person that's driving, right? So we are trying to map this out, and we plan to share this data with everyone. We want to keep this open. But again, we are at a very, very early stage. But this is one use case where we're trying, at least in few cities, we've been able to do this.
That's wonderful. So actually, things that you talked about, developing at Bosch, they've actually started also implementing some of those in their microcosm, which is really remarkable. With that, I would just move the discussion to a slightly different trajectory around, connected cars and the concept getting extended to connected living. And therefore, the question to you, Dattatreya, on that is that, cars are becoming an extension of our lifestyles, and with all the gizmos in there, you can actually, one, be hyper-connected while you're driving or while you're in the car, whether the back seat or the front seat, and also some new business models evolving. For example, you may be using the car only for a few hours in the day, and for the rest of the time, can the car be used for something else? So your take on that based on the technologies that Bosch is making.
Sure. Excellent question indeed. So with connectivity, a lot more things will evolve, yeah? Just you gave some flavors of that. We rightly say that, a lot of people rightly say that the car is the third living space, the first one being our houses and the second being workplaces. So besides these two, where we spend most of the time, and with traffic jams in India, I think we spend quite a lot of more time, whether we like it or not, in the car. So how can we, what experiences we can have? And one of the thoughts is on seamless experience. Like I had, depending on my mood, depending on my preferences, there are a lot of things which technology now can help make our lives better in the car. I give you some examples. They may be just points on the radar. Maybe the storyline doesn't come out, but my attempt would be to take you think in that direction. So let us assume that my phone, that's the central piece. My phone basically knows my calendar. It knows how lengthy meetings I've had in my office today, how tired I could be. It also basically is looking at my preferences. So my phone now knows very clearly what sort of beverages I like. Maybe I like coffee, I like tea, things like that. All that information, whether we like it or not, is available on the phone, and we have actually developed a personalization software which we have recently started rolling out, which all the due respects to the data privacy, it maintains all that data on our phones, our preferences. And the only interface that it exposes to the external world is protecting my privacy. It gives my preferences out. And in the way that I can filter out and I can receive filtered information. So not much of preferences going out, but preferences being used for filtering out. So now just let me give you some examples. Let us say I had a tough day, and my phone knows that my playlists of my music are known, and then probably it can already suggest some genre of music, what I might like at that point of time. You like it or not, the car will automatically play it, yeah, and you will feel good about it, yeah. If I have, for example, if I am more a digital person and I tweet, yeah, car rear seat is a good place to tweet, and then we will upload the things and we will actually bring out some of the personal preferences on tweets to a mobility device. It could be a tab, it could be a phone, but it is a seamless experience. Yeah? That is where technology is moving in. So I gave you examples of, let us say, controlling music system, controlling the ambience of the car, controlling the, yeah, to getting preferences. I'm driving on a highway, yeah. I need my my shopping lists would be known, and my preference lists are known. I am now integrating this into the, let us say, environment of hypermarkets, supermarkets, And from there, I would basically get a lot of information. So imagine a situation that, I need to pick up milk, and they would say, okay, by the way, you wanted to pick up milk, and then, your favorite coffee is also, coffee day is available, and you might like to have one, yeah? And these are things which come out of preferences, not being forced on me, but I like to receive such information, yeah? So I can go on with that, but this is really very, very exciting use of these technologies. And this basically then takes into not only my personal car, but let us say if I'm in a shared car. Yeah? Let us say when I'm in a rental car, or shared mobility. Also my preferences will travel with me and get that good experience. So this is very exciting.
Very, very interesting, very interesting. Just last part to that question was also say, what sort of a new business model could say come for your car? You're driving it, say 2 or 3 hours a day, but rest of the time it's parked.
Yeah.
Do you think such solutions could also take out some additional business models like that?
Sure, I think Rajesh is more apt to answer that question. But yes, new business models are coming up on shared mobility. The big question is that car is still associated with my personality, and if I own my car, how open, yeah, and this is beyond technology basically, yeah, how open am I to share my car with somebody else? And maybe the generation that I belong to had a certain preference that, oh, this is my car and it is a status symbol. But when I look at the youngsters, the millennials, they don't have that emotional binding with the car, and they might like to take it as an asset. Yeah, and asset utilization would be, so I can offer it for shared ones. I might not buy a car and always depend on such shared mobility. Yeah.
Understood. Thank you. Dr. Ann, you wanted to respond to that as well.
I wanted to add to that as well, in that it's not about the technology, but it's about the infrastructure. And it does offer and open up opportunities. So in Singapore, for example, we're looking at the opportunities here. So in Singapore, looking at the shared cars, putting more and more people into public transport, and the public transport rate is very high. But what does that mean for all that land premium that is multi-story car parks, which is very, very expensive land, it's very expensive real estate, and could you actually think about a different business model? So we're looking at this in terms of, this could be used as an alternative use during the day. So if you're actually sharing your vehicle, and there's much more about shared vehicle and shared mobility, then you don't need as much space for car parking spaces. So downtown, which is where all the nice car parking spots are, they could actually be converted to something else. And taking that to another extension, so that's one business opportunity, but another extension of that is very much something that I've been pushing for quite some time. We should be looking at design. So you're talking to me about design. We should look at design not for a primary use of a facility, a building, a car park, or whatever it might be, or a road, or a tunnel, or a power station. We should be looking at it for its secondary use. So I don't think, today we design buildings and we design facilities for 50 years, 100-year lifespan, etc. But actually, I think we might be looking at design life of maybe 10 years. And then, you don't want to knock them down, because we're trying to find alternative uses. So we have a lot of real excitement about alternative uses and business models. And again, let's get designers and technologists working together for the future opportunities. It's very exciting.
Yes, certainly a very, very powerful idea. Yes, please add.
Sorry, I'm tempted to, because you basically brought out the parking systems. And I would like to give you a perspective on that. With parking houses and autonomous parking, valet parking is one function which we have just launched together with Daimler on Mercedes brand of cars. So basically what we say is that you come out of the car and say, Fifi, park yourself. And the car actually goes and parks itself. Now what is so nice to do that is, probably in India we don't have this situation, but in Western countries where parking houses are very, very limited parking, and approximately 30% of fuel savings can be achieved only if we can automate the parking and get the parking. 30% of the time, the Stuttgart roads, the cars are only looking for parking spaces, for example. Yeah, and in that case, one big thing what happens is that if it is like a driver car parking, then I need to basically have enough space around me to even get out of the car. Yeah, and you try to compromise on that with automated parking, they can actually get stacked, and we can save 50% of the parking spaces. But then we don't have to have columns. And now I'm coming to a point that you have to redesign these park houses in a way that they are more like lots, not bays. And then when cars are required to be coming out, they can all sort of, 3 cars can shift and 4th car can go out, something like that automatically.
Very, very interesting ideas coming out of the forum right now on that. Yes, certainly.
Actually, that's prompted me because if we started up with autonomous and ADAS and these technologies, which are of course very exciting, and I spoke of, I say we don't wait until it happens. We've moved on to shared mobility, and this is not so much with the Mobileye hat, but it's just perhaps you'd be interested to understand my own perception, is that these are 2 parts of a triangle. That's to say, the shared mobility and the autonomous, that even with all my talk about that it's not going to happen tomorrow and so on, I think, we do understand that perhaps not us, but our children in certain sections of road and certain areas, including in India and in campuses in certain areas, this is going to become, it is going to become a reality at some eventual stage, although that's not the present priority. And if we add to that the third corner of the triangle, which has not been mentioned yet, I think, which is EV, which is the government commitment to electric vehicles here, which is unequivocal. That's to say, if I understand correctly, the cutoff point is 2030. We already see initiatives with batches of 10,000 electric vehicles coming out, and I think we're on our second or third. You're on your second or third batch here of electrical vehicles. So if I put all of that together, the EV, the shared mobility, and the autonomous or the semi-autonomous or the platooning and so forth, what I wanted to say is that I'm actually very, very optimistic with regard to India. That is to say that I believe that the India that your children will grow up in, I think will be a more relaxed, laid-back, safer society, because the problem here is not people. Around the world, people love to talk about the 1.35 billion people that are here, but people is not the problem. People is not the problem. The problem is that when we finish up here, we need to go out, and my God, I don't know what the experience is of everyone just getting here, just getting to this place. So the problem is transport. So when we have shared mobility and EV and autonomous, I actually have a very optimistic outlook for India.
Thank you. You're certainly in the triangle. Yes, please, Rajesh.
So, Michael, actually, thank you for saying that, because that is exactly the Zoomcar strategy. But there is a third part of the triangle which we have not spoken about today. So for us, shared mobility is one, and EVs is second, obviously. But the third very important piece of the puzzle is micro-mobility. And micro-mobility is the last mile connectivity, right, which is the 2 to 3 kilometer, around your house and office, connected to the metro station, connected to bus stand. And this is usually also in a very, very bad stage, because these are not high traffic roads, so they don't get maintained. And it is usually a very difficult, thing to travel in. And here we are experimenting with cycles. And so far, and these are dockless cycles, smart cycles with a built for urban mobility, built for with anti-theft features and stuff like that. And the adoption that we are seeing is amazing. I mean, we are on an average seeing, we have done close to 1 million rides already on cycles. And if you just and when we did feedback with customers are like, thank you for launching this. So as a business, as a product person, I can't think of a better response for the customer, right? And now, going back to shared mobility, I think there are 3 trends that are happening, which is helping in shared mobility, right? One is that the younger generation, the millennials, are becoming extremely more financial savvy, right? I mean, in our generation, the first maybe investment product was either a FD or an LIC policy, right? But a lot of these guys are investing mutual funds, so they understand the value of money, right? And they also understand the fact that car is no longer an aspirational purchase; it's actually a depreciating asset. So I might not want to invest in that. Second thing is that a lot of millennials are moving away from the city that they grew up in, right? So they're going to cities like Bangalore, Hyderabad, Indore, which are like newer hubs, newer hubs. And cost of living there is comparatively cheaper to, let's say a Bombay or a Delhi, right? So you can afford to stay close to your office. So you don't have like, mass transit times of, let's say 20 kilometers and 30 kilometers kind of thing, right? And the third thing that is happening is that, because of the advent of services like Uber and Ola and, and metro connectivity and obviously Zoomcar, the need for having a car is reducing. So these three combined is actually resulting in a drop in the number of cars. So if you look at April data, year on year, there is actually in some cities there is a drop as high as 25%. Obviously, this is more in in the tier 8 towns, tier 8 cities, but that trend is happening. So which is why shared mobility. I mean, companies like Zoomcar make a lot of sense. Primarily because you don't have to own a car. You can just subscribe to a car from Zoomcar, and then whenever you're not using it, you can list it back on the platform. That can be seamlessly shared by other customers. You don't have to interact with any customer, right? So that is the kind of service that we do.
I think, yeah, certainly very powerful ideas. And I think the first part that you mentioned around the last mile or the first mile, which, is a big deterrent for many people in our cities to even take public transport because there's no first last mile available. So I think the solutions like that will go a long way in also improving, the adoption of public transport in the cities and have a follow-on effect on congestion, etc. With that, I would also like to move to Mahesh. Tata Motors is known to bring frugally and locally relevant solutions in their vehicles. And connectivity is another thing that has been envisioned by Tata Motors. And we see many of those features come in the next set of vehicles that have been launched. So what is your take, and would you want to share about some of those solutions that are there in the vehicles?
What I see here is in earlier days, let's say 5 years before today, we were considering car as a device for pleasure, right? The moment you go to autonomous driving, that pleasure is taken away. So you are defying the whole purpose of it. So obviously, as an OEM, we have to think of the mobility solutions, like Zoomcar. If I look at it as a personal, business model, now Dattatreya also said that we can have preferences stored into the vehicle, but the moment we start sharing the vehicle, then preferences of people will be different. So what I see here is that if we can have a AC in the front and AC in the back, maybe we can create a zones, 4 zones, and have those preferences stored into that vehicle. Wherever you go, whichever vehicle you choose, something like you have bicycles just posted with a mobile app, you can pick up the bike for the last mile connectivity and then drop somewhere else. Same way, if we can have the vehicles, which will have the preferences stored, whether it's a shared one or a carpool or something. So that's point number 1. Definitely, what we see is that we have to have a system evolution, we have to have a time evolution, and we have to have a process evolution in the whole gamut of, whether it's a connectivity or whether it's autonomy. Same thing applies to the commercial vehicle. For example, I'll give both the examples, how a business model can be developed. In car, because ultimately, if there are not going to be the personal vehicles, so to say, by virtue of autonomy, obviously we have to look for something like Zoomcar, Ola and all those things and start projecting those products. So in a personal vehicle, supposing I'm traveling from, I came from Pune to Delhi yesterday, and it clicked in my mind that I can drop my vehicle for the servicing, my own vehicle, pick up the taxi from there, go to the airport, reach here from airport to hotel to this place and back. The whole complete solution of mobility, if someone can provide, it will be a co-creation between, amongst, let's say, OEM, the service provider, and the IT companies. That becomes a totally disruptive or innovative business model. Same case, the second example, if I give about commercial vehicles. Supposing I'm having the fleet, based on the requirement of cargo, let us say, if I can select a vehicle out of my fleet, send it to the warehouse, have the supply chain management hooked up to it, select a cargo which will have again compartmentalization in the container so that you have a cold chain products and non-cold chain products within the same container. You can optimize the size and the shape of the goods. While I'm getting my vehicle loaded in the warehouse, it's on the platform and it's getting serviced. So you are saving times. I'm talking about time evolution, all the same. Now here, what happens is that it doesn't need only autonomy. It needs automation also.
Right.
So whatever goods are getting stored or loaded into the vehicle has to have automation. So you have to club autonomous vehicle or connected vehicles along with automation for the commercial purpose of it. So this is the business model that we can look for in the commercial sector. Something parallel to, there the goods are people, here the goods are the cargo. So something like that we can. But definitely it means that we have to have partners coming together, partner from IT companies, software companies, the service provider, the logistic people, and the OEM. So this could be one business model that we should look for.
Certainly, and thank you for adding the commercial vehicle perspective also on that. So, we've had a lot of positivity on the panel, and, I was just thinking whether I should ask this question or not ask this question, but, I would like to put that to Dr. N. So, many of the panelists would agree, in India, of late, the auto industry has been, at the receiving end of policy flip-flops, inconsistencies, etc. Now, we also know for all of this, some guidelines and policies have been framed. For example, the US government has framed them, the government of UK has framed them. What do you think is the ideal sort of a body to take care of this connected autonomous revolution in a country? And does it need to be as far as possible hands off from what is happening? Or do you think they actually need to, needs to be set up right at the start of things and be an active constituent of all that is happening in this space, so that we can have a consistency on policy on, this is what all you can do in the country, and this sort of a path that can be followed, and these are sort of areas where you can't go. We've seen that also with the solution from Bosch, which was the night vision system that was introduced, but some places maybe we had some regulatory issues with using it in the Indian environment also. So just your take on that, given your global experiences.
What a question. A very, very good question indeed to ask, because my immediate reaction is actually laissez-faire is better, and let the technology and let the entrepreneurs and let business actually flourish. Because if you put too many regulations around, then you will have a lot of impediments to development. You'll also have a lot of discussions about protectionism and so forth. And I think the laissez-faire approach is a really good one, actually, to allow the entrepreneurialism to actually come through. And that is what is really, really very strong here. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. But, and this is the eraser word, because I actually think that government, and there should be a government oversight, they should actually be regulating some of the aspects, and there should be some controls, but not total control. So I think it should actually be very much about allowing the market to drive itself. And then you'll get huge opportunities. And you asked the question about the developments and so forth. You have a lot of opportunities in your new cities and in the new development zones. You have huge opportunities to actually go out there, do pilot cities, pilot communities, demonstrate that this all works really very well, rather than having to try to fit solutions into existing communities and cities and so forth. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, certainly it does. Thank you so much.
For a bit of fun, I'm actually prepared to disagree with
all right, okay, yeah. Yes, so, please do.
Because that's to say to a certain extent, because again, if this panel is about AV and autonomous and ADAS and connectivity and so forth, if we look at the advent of technology generally speaking, and not at all in the automotive space, if we just look at the internet and social networking and so forth, what we've seen in the past is that the technology comes way ahead of societal reaction to it and so forth. And I take specifically the internet as an example, and of course what we've seen recently with social networks and so forth. And I think children, let's say 10, 15 years ago, put it this way, there are people who go for an interview today in the United States where the moment they've walked out of the interview room, you just Google and you'll see something that was tagged 15 years ago that, my God, if people had understood what the significance of that was then, they would have not at the frat party, and so forth, had that photograph taken or whatever. We've got sexting going on. We've got So if we extrapolate that to the whole autonomous space or not just, but ADAS and so forth, I have something to ask you. Every year in the United States, 40,000 people lose their lives on the road. Now, if I was to come to you and say, okay, we will introduce technologies that will halve that to 20,000, not 40,000, would that be acceptable? And the answer is absolutely not. We're prepared for humans to kill humans at the rate of, for example, in India, 150,000 or perhaps even 200,000 per year if we take unreported accidents into account, or in the United States, 40,000. So 20,000 we would not be prepared to put up with either. And I would say that not even 1%, that's to say, if I was to say machines are going to now take over transport, but please take into account that there will be 400 people that will lose their lives, even that would not be acceptable. So why am I saying that? Because as we move into these, what will be acceptable, by the way, is about 3 orders of magnitude. We, in our tradition, say that he who has saved a life has saved an entire world. But if I do take, let's say, that 40,000 lives that are lost in the United States, and I was to say, well, actually, if we have a technology that we believe, or that we're able to show that 40 deaths per year, which is 40 too many, but 40 is what we can expect to happen, then that is which is, by the way, about the number of people that are killed every year through malfunctioning of airbags, okay? So that then would be a technology that we could take on.